Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Dane from NYYU. We'd like to welcome you to the Yankees Farm Report special edition. We have prospect writer Greg. How you doing, Greg?
I'm doing good today, Dane. It's another day in paradise.
Absolutely. Now, you've been helping us write for a long time. You want to tell us a little bit about your background, a little bit in prospects?
Well, I've been writing about prospects for a long time. I started off with my own, personal website, and then I was able to start writing for Bronx Baseball Daily for a while they were up and running. And after that, once that site kind of went down, I started writing on my own site again, and then NYYU picked me up again. So I'm happy to be a part of the team.
Great to have you. Now, for this show, we wanted to talk about the best pitching prospect in the Yankee system. We all have a little bit different opinions, but they're all very viable top pitching candidates. Want to start with Will Warren, Clayton, or Chase Hampton, and Drew Thorpe. Los, what do you have?
Well, for me, I've been a big advocate of Chase Hampton all season long. To me, I just think that he probably has the highest ceiling of all three guys. And I'm just a huge fan of his. Um, we see what he did at Somerset or at Hudson Valley. He continued on at Somerset. He, ran into a little bit more problems in Somerset because of course, advanced hitting. It's a bit of a different league, different ball, whatever it may be. So, I'm very optimistic on Hampton.
Greg?
Well, you guys know I'm a Will Warren guy. Now, that's not to take anything away from Chase Hampton. That guy has got tremendous ceiling. His fastball reaches the upper 90s, and his stuff is stellar. But a guy like Will Warren, he's like Chase Hampton and Drew Thorpe, but he's a year ahead of him. He's in AAA, a hitters friendly league where initially he had an adjustment period. Last six starts of the season were phenomenal. So he has tremendous movement on his fastball. He's got great movement on all his pitches. Throws two different types of sliders. Has about five pitches that are usable. The only drawback for him is his control, and I think if he pares down his repertoire a little bit for the major leagues, he'll be ready to go next year. And I think with the movement he gets on his pitches, which is elite, that you'll get a guy
Yes.
who can get just about anybody out at the major league level.
And the thing about Warren, he already ditched the cutter and the curveball the last few starts of the year. So we saw that pitch package come down a little bit. And that's when he really showed his big improvement from what I saw.
Think you're right, Dane. Last few starts of the season, he did pare down the repertoire a little bit. And I think that is part of the reason why you saw a little bit more success. But I wouldn't be surprised also if he comes back throwing at least one of those pitches still, just to see if he can get better control of them.
Yeah, I could see that. And obviously, the guy left, and my favorite is Drew Thorpe. And all I got to say is he won minor league pitcher of the year.
It's not even fair. That's not
No,
fair.
but if you look at Thorpe, the thing that really stood out to me is how deep he went into games. You don't see a kid that's just 1 year out of college go average 6 innings to start, pitched in the seventh and eighth innings a couple times this year. Yeah, he was the last guy to get up to AA of the three, but when he got there, he got even better. And
Mhm.
that's what it stood out to me. That's when he really became the number one pitching prospect for me, is when he walked into AA. First outing was what was it, 7 innings, 9 strikeouts.
Mhm.
Second inning, it was 6.2 with 12 strikeouts. And that was against the Mets team that had three top 100 prospects in it. And he just made people look silly. But I think there's merit to both Warren and Hampton being top prospects as well, but they're different kinds of pitchers. What do you guys think of that?
I mean, as far as the Drew Thorpe, I think right now Drew Thorpe is probably. I mean, and granted, I know Warren is a little bit more advanced. He's in AAA while Hampton and Thorpe are still at Somerset. But I think Drew is a little bit more complete than all three of them. Who he is right now, I think is pretty much close to who he's going to be.
I could see that. I think he's going to work on adding a little bit of velocity. That's kind of been the rumor around the scouting blogs and stuff like that. He's working on adding to the sitting velocity. That's the only drawback with Thorpe is that he throws 91, 92 instead of 96, 97 like these guys, like Warren and Hampton. If he gets that velo going, what's stopping him from being an ace? Do you think he needs another pitch? Is there anything that stands in his way?
I mean, one thing that I did want to say about Thorpe is he sits about 91, 92, but he can get it up to 95. We've seen him do it a couple times a game. It's just not where he typically sits at.
Right.
And I think that velocity increase will come. How much of a velocity increase he gets is another question. My guess is at his size, he might get another 1 to 2 miles an hour. But if he gets more than that, I wouldn't be surprised. Additionally, he gets movement on all his pitches. He has unbelievable control, which, like Carlos alluded to, makes him probably the most complete pitcher of the bunch. I do think, and Dane, you're going to be mad at me for bringing this up, but I do think that it says something that the Yankees were much quicker to promote Chase Hampton to AA than they were to promote the Drew. So I think that sometimes when you look under the hood, those things are telling, more telling than you would know. Additionally, I do want to point out now, I think it's fantastic that he won Pitcher of the Year. I think it's even more impressive they did it in his first year in organization and reached AA, which was traditionally not something that Yankees prospects would do. But I will say that there have been many pitchers of the year in Yankees history who did not turn out to be aces. You have the Zach McAllisters of the world, David Phelps. Those guys were pitchers of the years, in years back. But and there's nothing against those guys. They turned out to be great major league pitchers, but they did not turn out to be aces. So, I think a guy like Will Warren, guy like Chase Hampton does have that potential. I don't think Thorpe, as he is right now, has that potential. Now, there's no telling if he adds velocity, if he could become that guy. But I don't like to operate on ifs when I rank my prospects. I like to operate on what they have now. And if you look at what they have now, I think Will Warren has a total package. He has more control than Chase Hampton. He's more of a finished product than Chase Hampton. He's up in the mid 90s, sitting in the mid 90s. So his velocity is a little better than Thorpe. And again, this is not to take anything away from those guys. They're awesome,
No,
and I think they're
absolutely
going to be
not.
great pitchers. But I think when you look at the total package, Warren's the guy who has all of it, and the other guys still have some work to do to get to where Warren is. So for me, it's Warren, and I think he's ready to be a major league pitcher this year.
I can see that. Lowe's?
Yeah, I had no argument for me there. 100% in agreement with you. I'm the Chase guy, but again, I know that Chase is nowhere or is not close to where Hampton is. I'm sorry, where Thorpe is or where Warren are. But it's my hope, and I'm optimistic that he will surpass those two guys. Because when I see him, I see a guy that's going to be a frontline starter. I don't know if that's the case for Thorpe or for Warren, but that's what I see when I'm looking at him.
I think there's no arguing with the ceiling there. You got Hampton, you got a guy whose ceiling is tremendous and probably the highest of all of the three guys. And from that perspective, it's hard to argue that he's not the guy who has the potential to be the number one more so than the other guys. But again, I think there is the factor of likelihood of reaching that ceiling. And with Hampton, I think the likelihood, while it's still pretty high considering he's doing what he's doing at AA, it's not as high as the other two guys in this conversation of hitting the ceiling.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the upside with Chase is the highest of the three, but I think he probably has the lowest floor as well. But either way, all three of these guys, I think they're major league starters for me. I'm not sure, like you said, if Thorpe ever ends up an ace, but I think he's the safest bet to be at least a number 3 or better of that group. Again, I really like Will Warren. the movement on the pitches is what stands out to me the most. I mean, I don't know how anybody hits that with any kind of consistency when you have 20 inches of movement on almost most of the pitches he throws. It's just going to be see how he adapts to the major leagues. He didn't adjust to AAA real quickly. So I'm hoping the transition to the major leagues is a little bit quicker for Warren than we saw with AAA, but I think he's going to be a part of a rotation next year. I just don't know which rotation.
Of course, for Warren, I mean, I know he started a little bit rough. You guys both have already alluded to that, but I think it's more important how he finished, right? Those last, I think it was 7, maybe even 8 games, he was just dominant. He was just flat out dominant. And there was a bit of an adjustment, right? Different ball. It's a lot more offensive oriented. It's a different ball as well. To me, I was very surprised at the way he ended, and I was very happy with it.
Yeah, he just absolutely ended on such a strong note, and he really showcased himself. I would have really liked to have seen him got a couple of starts in the Bronx at the end of the year. Obviously, they weren't going to do that with him not needing to go on the 40-man yet, but I think he would have been capable of making a couple starts in the major leagues last year. Greg?
I agree. And to be fair, I could say the same for Drew Thorpe. And I think there was consideration for both of these guys to get some starts at the end. The Yankees went a different direction. They wanted to give Montes a chance to prove himself, to see if they want to re-sign him this year. Makes sense. But I would have loved to have seen Warren or Thorpe get some action. But again, you have to other things consider. You're starting the time on the 40-man roster. You're starting to use up those options next year if you put them on the 40-man roster right away and the 25-man roster. So, I think that there are other considerations why these guys didn't get put in at the end of the year, but I would love to see it. All 3 of them were really good enough to do so. And it's a blessing to have all 3 of these guys in the system at such a high level at this point in time. My guess is by the end of the offseason, we won't have all 3 of them in our system anymore, unfortunately. But who knows what's going to happen with trades? You know how they are. They can fall apart real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing, that I'm glad to be having this conversation, because I don't ever remember the Yankees having 3 starting pitching prospects of this caliber before, in the 10 or so years that I have been following prospects. So I'm glad to be having this conversation.
Yeah, I think you have to go past the 10 years you've been following the prospects to when they
Like the
had
Brackman days,
Phil Hughes,
um,
to Java
Jabba,
Chamberlain and
Ian
Ian
Kennedy,
Kennedy
who
all in
just
the system at
retired.
the same time, or maybe when they had Banuelos, Betances, and
Brackman.
Andrew Brackman all in at the same time.
Killer
But even
bees.
then, I don't think those guys had the same type of potential as these 3 do. Or maybe Phil Hughes and Jabba did, but at the end of the day, they didn't turn out to be what we were hoping for. These guys all have the potential to do that, and it's an exciting time again, to be a follower of the Yankees prospects.
Absolutely. Now, you brought up an interesting point going back to how highly ranked these 3 are versus Jabba, Hughes, and Kennedy. Those 3, the Jabba, Hughes, and Kennedy, were very, very highly touted pitching prospects. Hughes was the number 1 pitching prospect in baseball at one point. Jabba was a top 10, and Kennedy was the top 100. We haven't seen these guys in Thorpe, Hampton, and Warren ranked that highly yet. But for me, I think these guys are better than Jabba, Hughes, and Kennedy were, in my opinion. I think their pitch packages are better, their command's better. I just think they're going to be better pitchers in the long run.
I think there was a little bit of overrating going on back then. The Yankees didn't have as good of a system, so these guys were really touted. And also, when you really look back, if you were being honest with yourself, Phil Hughes has straight fastball, right?
He did.
That's why he got hit so hard when he hit the majors. None of these guys have straight fastballs, which is great to see. And Phil Hughes also was, I believe, a first round draft pick. It's a lot easier to break into these top 100 lists if you're a first round pick. You know,
And
it's
he was
kind
out
of,
of high school, right? He was out of high school.
Yeah, he was
I
out
think
of
he was,
Cali.
yeah. These prospect rankings, these top 100 rankings, they're great. They're fun to talk about. They generate a lot of conversation. But it's like I always say, it's no different than ranking the farm systems. I don't think any one source has enough knowledge to truly do a great job on these top 100s. And therefore, the first round picks tend to get a lot more attention, a lot more scouting, and are more likely to be ranked in the top 100.
Los.
Yeah, definitely. He's right on. As far as the prospect rankings, we've had this conversation before. I mean, I used to look forward to them, but the more that I've been doing this, it's more like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make sense. How the hell did this guy get ranked before this guy? When this guy, I'm a big like Greg. I'm a big advocate of what are you doing for me, not so much as what is your ceiling going to be. So I'm in 100% agreement with Greg on that. And going back, I mean, another reason why those pitchers could have been ranked so high is because before them or outside of them, who else can you think of that was even the top pitching prospect for the Yankees? The only guys that I can remember are, besides Brian Taylor, were like Sam Militello or Christian Garcia.
Well, you guys know what I think of Chris Garcia, but yeah, they haven't had pitching like this ever that I remember.
No.
And it's
And
funny,
even when
you
they
look
and even when they did have the killer bees, who did you hear of outside of those?
very few. And moreover, it's kind of funny when you look back and you look at the Yankees pitching prospects that have had success in the major leagues, and you look at guys like Andy Pettitte, who was never a highly touted prospect. You look at a guy like Jordan Montgomery, who just pitched so great in the World Series, and he was never a highly touted prospect, never ranked in the top 100. So these rankings, take them with a grain of salt.
Absolutely.
It's
Now,
name recognition, pretty much.
it is. But you guys brought up an interesting point, and since we all know about these prospects, we might as well go a little deeper. We have a couple more pitchers: Richard Fitz, Brendan Beck, Brock Selvidge, and then we have Henry Lalane, who is the farthest away. But when we're talking about how deep we are in pitching, those guys are all legitimate top pitching prospects themselves, or have the potential to be. The Yankees are doing a better job of finding these kids and turning them into legitimate pitchers. I mean, what have you guys seen in the change in the system since 2021?
I mean, I think you go back even further and look at their recent trades that they've been making with prospects that they've turned into legitimate prospects from being drafted later in the draft. And some of the guys that we've been really excited about in previous years have been traded away. And they've been a nice return on those prospects that in the past they never would have gotten. Um, so I think they're doing a much better job of turning these guys out. I think the guys you mentioned were great. They're just the tip of the iceberg, though. I mean, I could name probably about 10 more who I'm super excited about that could easily pop as early as next year. So, this is a system that has been able to turn these prospects out, churn out starting pitching prospects, especially. And I think there's more to come. It's going to keep happening every year, in my opinion.
Yeah. Los?
I mean, outside of those top three guys, like you mentioned, you have Henry Lalane, Brock Selvidge, Clayton Beeter, who they traded for. You have Lagrange, Jack, Yoendrys Gomez, Brendan Beck, who I really am excited seeing what he can do next season with a full, healthy season behind him. There's a bunch of guys here, even in the bullpen. We've spoken about Jack Neely, Danny Watson, Luis Velasquez. There's a lot of exciting arms in the system.
Now, speaking of guys in the system, that I don't think everybody's sleeping on Luis Gil. I always have been
a forgotten man.
Yeah, I've always been a big Gil guy. That fastball slider changeup is special. And I've been told during his rehab, he's added a cutter and he's gone from the straight change to the circle change. He was an impressive starter when he came up to the major leagues. Do you think that he's going to continue in that role? Do you think he's traded? Do you think he's put in the bullpen? What happens to Heel?
I honestly don't know. I mean, what are we looking at as far as an innings cap for him?
You probably go back to his last healthy year and drop 20%. So we're probably looking at 80, 90 innings.
I mean, it also depends on what they do on the Yamamoto front. So I have to think bullpen.
I have to agree with
Or
Carlos there, and it's not a matter of how good he is. He's got the talent to be a starter. We've seen it in the past, but it's more of a matter of space. I mean,
Mhm.
does the rotation at the major league level even have space for this guy? And in reality, even if they don't get Yamamoto, they already have five starters,
Yeah.
and Luis would have to really break through the glass to get through to that and get a spot in that rotation. Whereas bullpen is still kind of wide open. There's some guys, I think they have some guys that definitely are guaranteed spots on that roster, but I think when you start getting down to the end of that bullpen, you got some open spots that are going to be a competition to see who gets them. And I think Luis fits really nicely into that into that mold. He's got the high velocity fastball, which will go well in relief. And now he's got some secondaries that he can go after hitters with. And he could be a shutdown reliever, which the Yankees really need right now.
See, I think that he has the pitch package to be a closer. And with that fastball that gets up to 99 to 101, that'll play up in shorter outings as a reliever. That slider, I mean, when you're a closer, you really only need those two pitches to be effective. I don't, we don't have a real dominant closer in Clay Holmes. I think that putting Heel in the back of the bullpen and just letting him see what he turns into could end up being a special arm back there.
I have to
My
agree with
only
that. That being said, a closer role is a role you earn. You have to not only prove that you're a shutdown reliever, you got to also prove that you can handle the pressure, right? And
Uh-huh.
we don't know that about Heel yet. We don't know whether he's
No.
a guy who can handle the pressure and handle that ninth inning when the other team is breathing down your neck. So that's an earned role. I think long term he could potentially fill that role. Right now, that role is Clay Holmes is to lose.
Now, one thing
for
I
me as
will
far
say
for
about,
me as part for me as far as putting him at that closer role, it just depends on what his command looks like in spring training.
yeah, I'm not advocating for him to go straight into the closer role. I would like to see him start in the back of the bullpen and see if he can handle it. But as far as why I think he can, we saw him pitch under pressure with that scoreless inning streak that he had,
Hmm.
that he kept up, and he excelled. What was it, 17 innings he started a scoreless, the longest in
I
American
thought
League
I thought it
history,
was I thought it was a little over 17. Yeah, about 17. Yeah.
something like that. Anyway, but he handled that pressure fine. And obviously, that doesn't compare to closing a big playoff game or anything like that. But it gives you an idea that he doesn't buckle when stuff gets hard. It's just my thinking. But you mentioned Clay Holmes. Do you really feel comfortable with him in the closer role?
I mean, you
When
could
he's
do
on,
worse.
yeah, when he's on, absolutely. I mean, he seems to. One thing I have to give him credit for is he seems to buckle down when it matters most in terms of playoffs. And I remember everyone was nervous about him heading into the playoffs in 2022, and he came up big in the playoffs. He did not disappoint there. I'd take that over an Aroldis Chapman who looks great during the
Oh my
regular
God.
season
Oh,
and then gets trampled by Jose Altuve in the postseason. Uh, no, he had a couple fumbles during the year. Holmes, we're talking about. Holmes had a couple fumbles during the year. He had a couple of bad blown saves that certainly had a lot of people questioning whether he should be the closer or not. But towards the end of the year, he was solid. You put him up there, you can be pretty sure that the game's going to get shut down. So again, you could do worse at the closer position than Holmes for sure. And I think, having him at least start out there and, see what he gives us is the right move for now.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's basically it. It's that he's fine, but then he'll get the yips like 1 or 2 games in a row, and then all of a sudden people start with the here we go again, here we go again. So I mean, it looks familiar, but I mean, overall, if you take the entire season, I mean, he wasn't terrible.
And how many times, and not to compare him to the great one,
Yeah.
but how many times towards the end of Mariano Rivera's career did he have a couple games in a row where he blew a couple saves, and that whole Yankee fan base is like, all right, this is it. He's done. He's cooked. But he never
Hmm.
was. He never was. He had his hiccups just like every closer does. And
Hmm.
Holmes maybe had a little bit more of those hiccups this year than what you would expect from the closer. But again, when it matters most, he seems to buckle down.
I was gonna say, I think we had I remember going through the same thing with Dayne Betances, right? But then he had 4 consecutive
yeah,
seasons where he was an all-star closer, and nobody in the business was better than him at that time.
no. Greg and I used to write about Betances, and my goodness, was
I
he
was a
good
huge
when he?
fan.
Yeah. What was he? A 10th round pick out of New York City, and they signed him for $1 million.
I don't really remember.
I think this was I think he was signed before the draft cap. So,
Yeah.
um, they got him later in the draft, but I don't think he was a first round pick,
No,
uh, but
10th, wasn't he?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure the exact round that he was drafted in, but I know he wasn't a first. I don't believe he was a first round pick,
No.
and uh, and nobody expected him to become what he did.
Now, he's a big stuff guy, Betances was. We have another guy in our farm system, Justin Lange, who is similar to Betances, and his stuff is, but he also is like Betances, that he struggles with his control. Do you think that Lange is fixable? Do you think that he ends up in a rotation, a bullpen role? What are your guys' feeling on Lange? Los?
Um, he looks good. He looks good. The velocity looks good, but then at time he just absolutely loses it. Yeah, I don't know. It's a little frustrating to see, right? Because you're hoping that he can put it all together. I think we've been watching this now for 2 years, 2 seasons
Uh-huh.
now or so. And there are times where there's 4 or 5 games where everything looks good, and then all of a sudden he's just off the rails. So I'm not sure. I would um, keep trying to put him in the rotation until you just can't do it. Until it just looks like it's unfixable.
Right, like they did with Betances.
Yep.
Same kind of deal. Get him as many innings as you can, get the control up to where you need it to be, and then launch him in the bullpen if you can't hack it in the starting rotation. By the way, I just looked it up. Dellin Betances eighth round. He was an eighth
Okay.
Mhm.
round pick, so we were all pretty close. As far as Lang goes, I think the key with a guy with control problems like Lang and like Betances in his time is incremental improvement. You're not going to see these guys you're not going to see them go from having almost no control to being a Drew Thorpe in 1 year. You're going to have some bumps in the road. And what you really need to see is each season their walk rate, control, their ability to hit their locations is incremental, small improvements every year, and getting better. And if they're getting better every year, then they're eventually going to get to that point where you see them really take off, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing you have to remember is these strike zones, as you go up in the levels, the strike zone gets smaller, and the umps get better. So if you look at a guy like Lang and you see an improvement in his walk rate, which he did have a slight improvement, uh,
Hmm.
if you look at a guy like him, you have an improvement in the walk rate, and he went from pitching in the FCL last year, and now he's in low A. So that improvement is actually more of an improvement than you can appreciate, because it's not only is his walk rate better, but also the strike zone is tighter. So with that in
Good
mind,
point.
the control has definitely improved for him. And I think that if he comes out this year with slightly more improved control, you're going to start to see some better numbers, maybe get that ERA closer to 4, maybe even under 4. And each year he's going to get better. I mean, this guy just needs innings. So I think he's a true potential breakout candidate, for this year and probably for next year too. As long as he keeps that golden arm going, he's going to be a guy who can always, you can always dream on.
Yeah, with that
Yeah,
velocity.
going back to the complex league, his walk per nine was 7.4, and by the time he got to Hudson Valley this year, he had dropped it to 5.6. So there is an incremental improvement.
I'm in complete agreement with you guys, both you
And
guys.
and on that note, just not to cut you off, but in that note, I saw the same thing from Carlos Lagrange, right? There was a slight improvement in the walk rate, and I know this at times he can get the yips as well, and command becomes an issue for him, but there is improvement going on there.
And I was going to go to the opposite end of the spectrum with control and move to Henry Lalane. Yeah. This is a kid who's 19 years old, who is 6'6", 6'7", and walked 4 batters in 30-something innings this year. You don't see that kind of control from a tall guy that young ever. I at least I don't remember it. I mean, what is this kid's ceiling like with the pitch package, his control that he has already? Los?
I'm not exactly sure where he ends up, but I can tell you that I'm very excited watching him. I love watching each and every single one of his outings. I'm very excited for this season to hopefully he's on Tampa's squad, so I will be able to see them when they go down to West Palm Beach, because I'm really want to see him live.
Greg?
Yeah, I mean, I think the potential is obvious. I think the scouts that saw him are excited about him. He has a small sample size, so the ERA was a little bit inflated. But when you look at the peripheral statistics, there's no way that ERA is going to stand. It's going to go down.
Yeah.
He's got control. He's got velocity. He's got everything that you need. He's got the height that we might add more velocity. He's a guy who I think everybody needs to be excited about. And my guess is if he stays healthy next year, everybody's going to know his name by the end of the year.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I was gonna say he pitched. I think he pitched like 21 innings, but and like watching him week in and week out, I think it was 2 bad games for him, and that's what ballooned the ERA. But like Greg was saying, if he's putting in more work, that will even itself out over time.
Now, let's talk about some sleeper pitchers in the system. Greg, you are always the guy that recognizes pitchers early. Let's start with you, because you're the first guy that got me on Waldichuk, Wozniacki. So who do you see that could be sleeper this year?
It's always a tough call. I tend to look at the guys on the whole rather than pick out 1 or 2 guys who I think are going to break out, just by the likelihood of it. A lot of these guys won't break out, but if I had to pick one guy who I think is going to break out next year, if I'm not allowed to pick Lalane, then I'll have to pick Jackson Fristoe. This guy had a huge velocity bump towards the end of the year last year. His control improved in his last few starts, and I think you're going to get a guy who starts out the season the way he finished it in 2023, and in 2024 he's going to come out swinging. Actually, not swinging, pitching, obviously, but he's going to come out with huge velocity, big stuff, and he could have a big breakout season. The other guy I think that I'd have to consider would be Beck. Beck, probably would have broken out this year if he reins had been taken off, but the Yankees took it slow with him, like they seem to be doing with a lot of their Tommy John guys, and.
Yeah.
I think he's going to come out this next year, and he's probably going to have a Thorpe-like season. If I had to predict one guy to have a Drew Thorpe season, it would probably be Beck. He's got all the stuff. His velocity spiked, and you're going to see a guy come out who's got control, and he's going to light it up, I think, in high A at first, and probably get a quick promotion to double A and make some noise.
Yeah. Los?
I was gonna say Beck, but he just stole my thunder. But I think Brock Selvidge is the guy for me. He did have a nice uptick in velocity. He looked really good when I saw him at Hudson Valley this season. He'll be the guy that I pick. And going down even lower to back to the DSL, probably Angel Benitez for me. He had Tommy John last season, so he should be back this year.
Well, you guys
Carlos,
stole.
with Angel Benitez, when do you think he'll be back? And my thoughts on it were his Tommy John kind of occurred at the beginning of the FCL
Mhm.
I'm sorry, the DSL season, and so would that
I
give
think it was
him?
in the off season. I think it was in the off season.
Oh, okay, you might be
I
right.
can go
You
back.
would know better than
It was
me.
in the off season.
Good, good. So you think so? My thoughts is he'll probably be back in time for the FCL season this year.
That is my hope. Yeah.
That would make a lot of sense. You guys stole both my breakouts were Selvidge and Beck. I think I was really, really impressed with Selvidge. What he added, the splitter and the cutter. He looks like a baby Andy Pettit. I know I've said that a
Hmm.
lot, but he really, really does. And the pitch package isn't all that dissimilar. The command
It's a
is really
great pick. I think. You know, the only reason I didn't say him honestly is because I felt his breakout already occurred this year.
that's
I think he had a great season,
He did.
and I think he can go higher than that. So I think it's fair to say
Hmm.
that maybe his breakout will be next year. But I think he's already there. He's probably the second tier of pitching prospects underneath those
yeah,
top three.
Absolutely
yeah.
agree.
And then the other guy was again Brendan Beck. I've been a huge fan since he was drafted,
Yes,
and
I can confirm. Yes, he has.
yeah, you both probably can. But he kind of reminds me of a combination of Thorpe and Hampton, just a little bit more fire than Thorpe, a little bit less emotional on the mound, but still very much a pit bull on the mound, like a Hampton. I think he's going to break out and be special next year, like you guys said. Any other pitchers you guys want to touch on?
Well, I think you gotta look at the rookie draft class. This team has been able to take pitchers from every draft and turn them into they turn them from sixth or seventh or even 10th round picks into guys who are top prospects. So I think you look at this draft, you got Kyle Carr, you got Judice, you know, you got some guys in there that really could break out. I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple of these guys do what Hampton did this year.
The one guy that really interests me in that draft class is Danny Flatt. Um, Late round pick, high school kid. You don't usually see a high school kid go that late. 6'5". He's right-handed, but the really interesting thing was the spin rates on the off-speed pitches, both the slider and curveball, close to 2,900 RPMs. It's a very raw tool set, but that is something that the Yankees, they can take him and mold him just exactly how they want to. It's a perfect pitcher's frame. You got all the tools with the spin and all that. I think that maybe not next year, but the year after that is when he will really break out, if he does. But Kyle Carr is another super athlete that I have been told about. Good left-handed kid, throws upper 90s, needs some work on the breaking pitches, but he's a good, very, very good pick for a third round. I don't know. There's so much pitching in the system. You got to be excited by it.
And yeah, to answer your question about Danny Flatt, I completely agree with you. I think he's probably, he's a guy who he could be like a Sean Herman or like a Brock Selvidge who breaks out right away, or he could be a guy that takes a year or two. It's hard to say without knowing what's going on behind the scenes, but I am definitely excited about him. That was a great pickup late in the draft. The other guy that I did want to at least mention is Cade Smith. So Cade Smith is a guy who, when you look at his movement profile, he reminds me a lot of somebody who we were just talking about earlier, Will Warren. He's got tremendous movement on the fastball. He's got secondary pitches. He's got decent velocity. If he picks up a few miles per hour, then he could easily move quickly, much like Warren did in his first season. So he's a guy to really look out for. Again, it all depends on his work in the offseason. No one really knows what's going to happen until we see him in spring training, but he's a guy I would look out for as well.
Well, history would suggest the last few years that they're going to have at least one or two later or mid-round breakouts. So that's a great pick. Los?
No, I mean, I gave you my guys. I don't have anybody else that I'm looking at right now.
Okay.
Carlos, who do you think is going to come out of the DSL this year and pitch strongly for the FCL Yankees?
My hope is Luis Serna. I really hope that he's able to break out of the rookie league. Because he did look good in DSL. He did look good early on as well in the FCL. And we haven't seen him since. Well, he had Tommy John, but he was pretty capped this season, from what I recall. The other guy that I really want to see take it up a notch is Chatniel Arias as well. He was really good in the DSL. He struggled a little bit when he came stateside. I believe his last game pitched 4 shutout innings. So there's hope for optimism there. The other guy might be maybe Mariano Salomon, only because I think he's 20 years old, or he just turned 20 years old. So he might be a guy you also see stateside. Oh, and of course the Venezolano kid, the 19-year-old kid, Kennison Diaz. He looked really good this season. Put up really good numbers too.
Los with the knowledge, always on those DSL pitchers. Last question, then we're going to get out of here. Major league rotation. What do you see the Yankees doing this winter? Put you on the spot. Sorry.
For me, I just hope that they leave one spot open for either Thorpe or maybe Will Warren. They don't completely block them off. But then again, who knows if those guys are going to be around here after the winter meetings.
So Dane, you know what I think. I think the offseason move here is to sign one of the big guys, get Yamamoto, get Snell, maybe even Montgomery, one of those guys, just one, and then you can trade from a position of strength and then use that strength to trade for some position prospects, position players that they are desperately in need of. They need a left fielder, probably 2 lefty outfielders, and I think that's your ticket to getting them other than free agency. You got to have somebody that you can trade for Soto. They're not going to give him away for nothing. So I think that signing one of those big names, unfortunately, is probably what they're going to have to do if they want to fill out their lineup and trades that they need to make.
Now, you're the Mike King out to be a starter guy. You've been telling me that for years and years and years. We saw him at the end of the year just be flat dominant out of the rotation. Do you think that continues next year?
Absolutely. I mean, he was a starter before that freak injury. They brought him back as a reliever, probably more so as a precaution than anything else, because they didn't know what was going to happen with that injury. He's proven his arm strength is back. He's proven that he can handle the innings. So I think that, I think for sure he's a starter. He's probably their 3rd best starter right now. And so, I think, let's say they don't make a trade. I think you're looking at a rotation: Cole, Rodon, King, probably Schmidt, and probably Nestor. I think that's what you're looking at day one. It's not a rotation. I think I'd be okay with them starting off with that rotation. They've got the minor league bullets to add in if one of those guys gets hurt or doesn't pitch well. And again, I think their gaps on the major league team are more so in the lineup. So if they address those gaps, I think they'll be fine.
Los, would you rather trade Schmidt or King for Soto?
I mean, the saying, right? If it doesn't hurt, that means it's not a fair trade. I mean, I think right now King is probably the Yankees' number 2. I don't know how much you can really count on Rodon with his injury history, and especially what he's been saying, talking about it's more important for him pitching in the second half. I just want him to pitch every 5 days.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm a guy that can't. How much can you count on that guy, right? So I would actually slot King ahead of him just because of that. Until Rodon proves me otherwise. I mean, if you give up King, I think it would hurt a lot less. Because if you give up Schmidt, it's gonna cost you a little bit more. And we don't know if the Yankees maybe take back a contract, right, to offset some more money from San Diego, entice them a little bit more to make a move. I would say Schmidt.
More
But like I said,
control.
if it doesn't hurt, then you don't. It's not a fair deal.
Yeah, agreed.
I think there's pluses and minuses to either of them. You look at Schmidt. I think you can just about guarantee he's going to get you innings, and that's an underrated metric in Major League Baseball is the amount of innings that a starting pitcher can get you. Schmidt can definitely get you that. Whereas King, I don't know that he's going to be able to give you 150 plus innings next year. I hope he can. I think he can, but I don't know. On the other side of the token, I think King has better pure stuff.
Yeah.
Hitters for whatever reason, hitters can't hit him. So he's a guy who I think, in terms of potential, has a higher potential than Schmidt. Maybe a lower floor just because he could get hurt pretty easily. But it's a tough call. I don't really think I can pick between the two.
And I was just gonna say, I don't care what anybody says, but going from the American League to the National League, he should see his numbers should improve a little bit better, a little bit more, I would say.
Now we see King with the ridiculous movement on his pitches. Does that remind you of Will Warren at all? Is there similarities there?
Absolutely. If anything, Warren has more movement on his pitches, and it's also why Yankees analytics department loves King, and it's also why they love Warren. So, yeah, I think the similarities are there.
Perfect, guys. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I think that's going to do it for us today. Greg, it was a pleasure having you on. I will be seeing you a lot more in the future. Los, you got anything else, bud?
No, I should be dropping Everson Pereira's season highlight reel sometime today. That's probably all I got right now.
Greg, what's your next article?
Next article is going to be a potential breakout candidate for next year. I'm not going to spoil it by telling you who.
Don't tell us.
But it's going to be coming out probably in the next day or so.
And I've got a Yamamoto Soto article I'm working on. So make sure to check out NYY Underground with that. Yankees Farm on YouTube, of course. Greg, Los, thanks so much, guys.
All right, guys.